Hey everybody, it's Ben. Go Ben. Mainly, etc. It's a recap for Game 3 of the World Championship match. Jan was white and Ding was black. Thanks Enzian Hero for the subscription. Hooray! And so forth. Okay, let's get into the game. Jan allowed an Imzo Indian. If he doesn't want to allow it, he can play knight f3 or g3 if he wants to play some other opening. And most grandmasters would play bishop b4 here. And there's other moves too, like d5, which was played, and c5. And that's about it. Okay, so he played d5. So this is a queen's gambit. Although, if white plays knight f3, black could play bishop b4 and get into a Rogozin, or play bishop e7 and keep it a QGD, or you can take this and transpose to a QGA, and c5 could be the Taresh or semi-Taresh, depending on what moves are made. It would be a semi-Taresh because he would take with the knight. When I'm white in this position, I play bishop g5, which I've done my whole life. The exchange variation is pretty popular when the knight's already on f6, because we can pin the knight, and it's hard for black to play bishop f5 quickly, which he'd like to do, because white would play queen b3 and these pawns are attacked. So black takes some time before he's allowed to play bishop f5, and then by the time he can play bishop f5, white's already stopped it. So then black usually, which happens in a lot of queen's gambits and a lot of queen pawn openings, has trouble with his bishop. Frankly, ridiculous. Let's see, chat. Nonsensical. Okay, so he played c6. c6 indicates that he may want to play bishop f5. And for example, after e3, because we could also play queen c2 here, after e3, one line is to play bishop f5 and then queen f3, bishop g6, and we double the pawns, and black gets the two bishops. That line has been played many times by many super GMs, and that's not the line that Ding chose today. Ding chose sort of a sideline, played h6. Now, one of the problems with h6 is when black does this maneuver, knight d7, knight f8, he doesn't want to play knight g6 because typically the bishop on d3 and queen on c2 are attacking g6 and the pawn's on h6, so it's not defended sufficiently. However, h6 could save a tempo later when white plays bishop d3, queen c2. If black has castled, then his h-pawn could be hanging. Bishop takes knight and bishop takes h7. And the other thing that can happen is sometimes black castles queenside and plays h6, g5 after there's a lot of trades with the move knight h5, which was played later in the game. Anyway, that didn't happen, but it could happen in another game. Bishop h4, bishop e7, bishop d3, stopping bishop f5 once and for all. Castles, queen c2, really stopping bishop f5. God damn. And the other problem that black has with playing h6 early is one of the ideas, if you don't play bishop f5, is to play bishop g4, bishop h5, bishop g6, and trade off the white squared bishops, which you can't do. Pawn on h7 you can do it, not with the pawn on h6, because G6 isn't defended sufficiently. So we can't play here, and we can't play here, and this is very passive, and this is more than passive. So black has to, live with the fact that his bishop's not so great. Now, the reason white has delayed playing knight f3 is it's more common nowadays to play knight ge2 and play for a big center, f3, e4. The other way to play is to play a minority attack where you play rook b1 and push your pawn to b5. And then your knight could be on f3 or e2. And either one is fine. Okay, so he played rook e8. This is actually the most common move. Rook e8 indicates one of two things. Black wants the f8 square for his knight, so the knight will go to e6. Or black wants to play knight e4, and when the bishops get traded, the rook and the queen provide sufficient defense to the e4 knight. So typically you'll see knight e4 at some point when rook e8 is played. Also, the rook's just better on e8 than f8, because rook on f8's no good. Rook on e8's on a half-open file. Okay, and knight ge2. And in my database, in ChessBase, there were like 1,000 games in this position. The game where the players were reasonable that was followed the most until it wasn't was a game Naroditsky played in a blitz game on the internet. And he had white in this position. And many super grandmasters have had white in this position. And black. Okay. And he played knight bd7, which is the most common move. Castles. And this is where Ding went off the beaten track. The Naroditsky game I was talking about, he was playing like a 2350. I think his name was Tahir. I don't know who that is. And this position, black typically plays knight h5, which Ding waited to play to trade off the bishops. And basically, since black has castled kingside, he's just trying to trade everything and say, well, this is equal. Like, nobody can do anything. And I guess, in some sense, Ding was still worried about the minority attack with rook b1, b4, b5, instead of the more standard play of f3, e4. And I guess, never play f3, so Ding didn't worry about that. Ding was worried about rook b1, the typical minority attack. And he played the move a5. A5 really has nothing to do with f3, e4. It has to do with trying to slow white down from doing this. Now, in the game Naroditsky played that was a blitz game, black followed up a5 with b5. Okay, that's not that that's why the guy's not a super GM. Okay, that's not the point of anything black is doing. Okay, so a3 was played. I guess he still wants to keep in mind rook b1, b4. But I must say, a3 isn't really the point of this variation. White wants to play f3 and e4. So I don't like the move a3. I think it makes a5 look good. So this seems to give very small advantage to white, nothing serious. So I don't like the move a3, actually. Now, when I was in Moscow in 1984 in Soviet Russia, I was 14. We had a chess seminar for 3 weeks at the Moscow Central Chess Club, and they were explaining this plan of f3, e4 that was first enjoyed at a top level many times by world champion Botvinnik. He liked to play this way with white, knight ge2, f3, e4. And typically, they said to me, if white plays f3, before he gets in e4, black should play c5 and disrupt the center. And that's actually what happened this game. So Soviet School of Chess won, rest of the world 0. Okay, so he played knight h5. This trades the bishops, because if bishop g3, I can just take it. So he trades bishops. And rook e1 is played, indicating he has no interest in rook b1, b4, b5. He's going to play f3, e4, but he needs his rooks on the f and e file to do that. And black is like solid but passive, and for Ding Liren, that's just his game. He likes solid and passive when he's black, and equalize the position. His opponent overextends, which Jan's been known to do, and then maybe he can win. Now, this game, it seems like Ding wasn't in bad spirits like he was in the first 2 games. Although, you never know what the players are thinking when they don't tell you. So when people were like, Ding is depressed and Ding seems out of sorts and what's wrong with Ding, and Ding lost game 2, and this is the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. I mean, it's possible that this is normal and the players just don't tell you. It could be all the players are depressed all the time, and they're not on press conferences telling you about it. There's a lot of pressure in a world championship, obviously. And it seems like he was in a better mood today. So, okay. So Ding played knight f8. Now his bishop can legally move. Where it can legally move, I don't know. And the knight can go to e6. Again, with the pawn on h6, knight h5 was easy to play because the h-pawn wasn't hanging. Now, if black wants to play knight g6, which he doesn't, then the pawn should be on h7. So if black doesn't want to play this and black doesn't want to lose his h-pawn, h6 early is fine. This position has never occurred in a Super Grandmaster game, mainly due to the early inclusion of a5 and a3, which, to be perfectly frank, doesn't seem important for either player. And I think a3 gives some credence to a5. So I'm not a big fan of either move. Okay. So he played knight c1, which is not what you want to play. You don't want to play knight c1, but I guess he felt sort of stuck. And what white wants to do is play f3, e4, never play f3. And problem with playing f3 is the e3 pawn is hanging. The problem with knight g3 and knight f4, well, knight f4 I think just loses to knight takes, is knight g3 we're trading pieces. And if you're playing for this big center and a big attack, you don't necessarily want to trade pieces. The other problem white has is if black's knight goes to e6, it's hard to play f3, e4 because your d4 pawn is weak. And you're like, well, my knight's defending my d4 pawn. Well, it's not after knight c1. This is just defending this. Now, another plan that white has in this opening is to not play f3 and just play e4 at once. And just forget about f3. And then the knight on h5 actually becomes alive. The knight can go to f4 at some point. So there's a lot going on. Even though the game seemingly was not very interesting, there's a lot going on that doesn't happen. And it's a battle of ideas. And today Ding had good ideas. Okay, he played knight f6. So if e4, we're going to do a lot of trading, and white doesn't want to do a lot of trading when he settles himself with an isolated d-pawn. He just wants to play f3, e4, and get the big center. Okay, which makes sense. Okay, he played f3, which is the point. Now he's going to play e4 next move, and after knight e6, he can't play e4 because the d-pawn is hanging. So black's position looks very solid, and he's preventing e4, but black's bishop on c8 is not, so active. Now, one of the reasons he played knight f6 from h5, although you could argue the knight's better on f6, why are you telling us, is black soon is going to play c5, as I indicated earlier, and the d5 pawn needs to be protected. Now, if white never plays e4, then why are these here? I mean, that's why he put his rooks here. That's why he didn't play rook b1 and b4, is he wants to play e4. Okay, so he played knight back to e2, defending his d pawn. So now he can play e4. And his e pawn doesn't need to be defended because the knight's blocking the queen. So he played knight c1, f3, knight back to e2, and now he's going to play e4, and everything's going to be great. That's his idea anyway. Okay, and black played c5. Now c5 isn't 100% necessary, but it does take a lot of the sting out of e4. We basically can't play e4 now because our d4 pawn is hanging. And we don't want to play e4 and just trade all these pawns. We're playing e4 to build the big center. We want the black pawn on c6. Then when we play e4, we have this nice pawn duo. So c5 is somewhat anti-positional because it gives up the b5 square, so the knight can come here and the bishop can come here. And before there was a nice pawn chain. But it makes f3 and e3 look sort of silly, like the pawn maybe should be back on f2 now. Then we could take this and have an isolated pawn position. Now this is a little, strange if you're not going to play e4. Okay, and here I think Jan gave away any vestiges of advantage he had with the white pieces. What he should play is knight f4. That attacks the d pawn, it defends the e pawn, and the engine says white has a little advantage, but not very much. A little bit, but nothing serious. And after the move that he played, he doesn't really have any advantage. So this is a really solid game by Ding, who was meeting f3 with the idea of e4 really well. He traded off a pair of bishops. He got his knights to good squares. He's putting pressure on the d4 pawn. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know why Jan didn't play e4 again. He got a nice position in the first game, and he could play some other novelties in the Ruy Lopez that he has ready. I guess he just wanted to see what Ding would do against d4, since Ding was probably ready for e4, since e4 was played in game one. But, okay, so he played bishop b5, and you could argue about whether white wants to trade the white squared bishops. I would say black does, because that bishop sucks, and this bishop was really good. On the other hand, Jan may have been worried about c4, and then the bishop has to go to f5, and we'll probably trade the bishops anyway. And then black will try to get a big queenside initiative eventually. Okay, so bishop b5, that gives away almost all of his advantage, I would say. Rook to d8. Bishop d7 is also fine, but it's nice to defend your d pawn. So that's good. dc, queen c5. And it doesn't look like black has any problems here. Now white really wants to play f2. And then, rook d1 and knight here. But okay, this pawn's hanging, so we have to do something about that. Queen d2, bishop d7, takes. And this position, Ding had to do some calculation, because the only thing to worry about if you have black is this d5 pawn. So the first calculation is queen takes d5, queen takes e3 check. That's fine for black. And then the other calculation he had to do was knight takes d5, which seems more like, I better calculate that. And it turns out this just wins for black. And the reason it wins is because after knight b6, typically you would play e4, but that's illegal. If I could play e4 and it wasn't illegal, then I would play e4. But it's pinned. And so now you're losing. If you defend your knight, like knight c3, for example, then it's still not defended sufficiently. The rook needs to be on d1. Okay, so we can't play queen takes. We can't play knight takes. And I'm going to refresh to get the color back from my color commentary. Okay. So instead he played knight d4, blocking the isolated pawn. And with this particular pawn structure, when you have an isolated pawn with black, or with white, but black has it, the isolated pawn is protecting these squares in white's position. So black wants to play knight e4 or knight c4. Guess which one he's going to play? Not knight e4, there's a pawn on f3. But knight c4 is sort of juicy. We attack everything. So he played knight b6 to play knight c4. And now you could argue who's better. And in the press conference, Ding said he was playing for a win around this point, but he couldn't really find any way to break through or do anything. Okay, so rook d1, really blockading the isolated pawn. Knight c4, attacking everything. This, and this. Queen f2, defending everything. Rook c8. And you can see that black has no problem now. I'd rather have black here. Black has the knight on c4. White's never going to play e4. And, white... it should be a draw, but I wouldn't take white here. So Jan played sort of wishy-washy this game by playing knight c1, knight back to e2, bishop b5, trading the bishops. The dogs didn't even like it. They're barking. The dogs are like, it's terrible. And black eventually got rid of his bad bishop, put his rooks in the center, and just totally dominates the center now. He's fine. Okay, so always repeat. He attacked the queen. The queen moved back. Rook e1, defending the weak e-pawn. Queen f6, and the players just repeated now. Knight c7 to trade, and they just went back and forth. And a draw was agreed. There's no reason why either side should think they have the advantage here, although I'd probably take black because I like my knight on c4. That seems nice. So a very solid game from Ding. Some of you may have noticed yesterday I tweeted, the match is 1.5-half. Why is everybody acting like it's 5-0 for Nepo? Okay. People in the sports world, and this happens on TV also, it's not just the gawking rabble on Twitter, but the gawking rabble on Twitter are undefeated. They're the most gawking. When you see the talking heads on like ESPN and Fox Sports and all those stupid channels, basically their analysis of sports is what happened the last game. That's their analysis. So, if the Braves are 6-1 and they lose 3 games in a row, there's something wrong and the Braves are finished. Then if they win 2 games in a row, this is what happened. Then okay, everything's fine. So, you play a lot of games of chess. You play a lot of games of baseball, basketball, hockey, football, if you can call hockey a sport, and you win and lose. That's what happens. And just because something happened in one game is not indicative of future results or mean that something is amiss. That's what happens. So this doesn't mean that Ding's going to win the match now that he drew easily with black, but nothing means much yet. It's a 1-point match and they played 3 games and it's a 14-game match. And people thought because Ding was depressed that he's finished and Jan's going to crush him and Ding's playing terrible and so forth. And that's just based on like one game. It's just, people go crazy. So I don't know who's going to win the match, but it doesn't seem like this game black did anything untoward and very easily drew with the black pieces. And he'll fight for an advantage tomorrow. Tomorrow's game 4, that's on Thursday. Now, tomorrow, Karen and I are going to the casino. And we're leaving in the morning. So I may do my recap and then go to the casino. But if the game's a really long game, then probably you won't see the recap until Friday afternoon. And they're not playing on Friday. They play 2 games, then rest, then 2 games, then rest. And then during the game, Ding also rests in his rest area. So that's good. You got to rest at all times. Everybody needs rest. Well, I hope you enjoyed that recap. That was a good recap. And the game was probably the least exciting of the 3 games, but that's because Ding equalized relatively quickly and nobody did anything stupid, so the game ended in a draw. That's a typical World Championship game. This seems like just pretty normal. They switched color order halfway through. I don't know. Yeah. And so forth. Okay, thanks for watching the recap, guys. I'll see you guys tonight. Karen and I will be streaming tonight. And so forth. I don't see anybody to raid, which is weird. What about Karen? Does she have anybody to raid? Oh, I could raid It's Ben and Karen.